Welcome back, dear listener, to another quiet journey through the hidden rhythms of our universe. Tonight, we drift downward to the warmth beneath your feet, where the earth holds its deepest secrets in silence. You may not feel it, but far below, something ancient stirs not in haste, not in rage, but with patience, with pressure, and with time. It's about the breath of a planet, the stillness before a storm, and the quiet power that lies beneath us all. So settle in, take a deep breath, and let yourself sink gently into the story that waits below. Asterisk, asterisk, you walk across the earth each day without thinking twice. Pavement, grass, tiles, sand, whatever surface your feet meet, it feels solid, grounded, permanent. But what lies below is anything but still. Beneath the crust, beneath the silence of stone, there is warmth, slow, ancient, and alive. The earth, though quiet on the outside, is never truly at rest. A soft churn moves through it, like a breath you cannot hear, but can begin to feel. If you're very still, you close your eyes now, and imagine yourself shrinking smaller and smaller and smaller, till the world above becomes distant and you begin to descend. First through soil and sediment, then deeper into the layers that hold the bones of mountains and the roots of continents. You pass fossils curled into forgotten stories. Minerals form from pressure and time, and seams of metal that shimmer in darkness. Deeper still, and the air grows dense. The heat wraps around you, not like fire, but like a blanket soaked in memory. This is where the story begins, not in chaos, but in patience, not in fire, but in warmth. Beneath your feet lies the asthenosphere, a soft, partially molten layer that behaves like a slow-moving sea. It moves in inches per year, but it shapes continents, opens oceans, and feeds volcanoes. It is the reason the earth breathes, swells, shifts, and in some places where the crust thins, or where ancient weaknesses exist, a chamber begins to form. A hollow space, a gathering place for magma. This magma is not wild, not yet. It rises gently from the mantle, carrying with it the memory of Earth's inner heat. It fills the chamber slowly, like water rising behind a dam. Only it does not flow freely. It pools, it collects, it waits. And while it waits, it changes. Crystals begin to form in the cooling edges. Gases bubble and dissolve. The pressure builds, molecule by molecule. It is quiet, but not empty. Still, but not dead. You might think of this chamber as a deep lung of the earth. It inhales over thousands of years, pulling in molten breath from the core. But every lung must exhale, and this one is learning how. Supervolcanoes are born not from sudden shocks, but from slow accumulation. Their magma chambers are immense, measuring tens of kilometers across, hidden beneath mountains or plateaus. These are not the sharp cones we picture when we hear the word volcano. They are vast, broad, often invisible from the surface. Their power hides in plain sight because it does not need to roar to be dangerous. It only needs to wait. As the chamber fills, the magma inside becomes increasingly buoyant. You can imagine it like warm air inside a balloon trying to rise, pushing upward but held in place by the weight of the crust above. And that crust, though strong, is not unbreakable. It bends, it stretches, it fractures ever so slightly with the strain. And still the magma presses upward, patient and persistent. Sometimes another pulse of magma arrives from below, fresh and hot, like a sudden influx of energy. This event is called magma injection. It doesn't always cause an eruption, but it adds pressure. It disturbs the balance. Like adding a final drop to a full glass of water, it doesn't take much to cause a spill. But in this case, the spill is explosive. You pause in your descent and listen again to the earth. It hums, not with sound, but with motion. You are inside a living system that moves in rhythms far slower than your heartbeat, yet just as real. Every 1,000 years, a few millimeters shift. Every million years, a supervolcano prepares. And still, above, people walk, cities grow. Forests bloom and wither, unaware of the giants sleeping below. One of the most well-known supervolcanoes is hidden beneath Yellowstone National Park in the United States. From the surface, it appears serene, glistening geysers, steaming pools, colorful terraces that attract millions of visitors each year. But those features are only the breath of something deeper. Underneath lies a massive magma chamber, stretching over 50 kilometers in length. It has erupted catastrophically in the past, and though scientists monitor it closely, no one knows when or if it will erupt again. It could be tomorrow. It could be 100,000 years from now. The chamber waits, and the pressure grows. But what causes it to finally erupt? That's where the science becomes subtle. It's not just one factor. It's many, slowly, quietly, often invisibly. The buoyancy of the magma, the formation of gas bubbles, the crystallization of minerals that increase internal pressure. Each one adds a little more strain to the crust. Then there's the instability of the roof, the ceiling of the chamber that must bear the weight of everything above it. Over time, that ceiling begins to sag. Cracks form, faults deepen, and when the strength of the rock is exceeded by the push of the magma, rupture occurs. Sometimes it takes an outside push, an earthquake, a tectonic shift, even the melting of glaciers above removing weight from the crust and allowing it to lift can be the trigger. The Earth is sensitive, and its systems are interconnected. A supervolcano doesn't erupt out of rage. It erupts because something tipped the balance, and when it does not look like fire flowing down a mountain. It looks like the sky turning to ash. The pressure release is so sudden, so violent, that the roof collapses into the chamber, and the explosion sends ash, gas, and molten rock hurtling miles into the atmosphere. What once built up over millennia is undone in hours. Life changes, but you are still far below, still listening, still learning. You begin to understand that what seems sudden is never truly so. Nothing in nature is. A supervolcano is the final exhale of a long, quiet breath. And that breath begins with the simple gathering of warmth, hidden beneath stone. You return now to your body, to the surface, to the quiet rhythm of your own breath. You feel the ground beneath you, against solid, yes, but no longer simple. You know now that it is alive, that below your home, your city, your forests and rivers, there is a slow ocean of rock, holding warmth, holding memory, holding pressure. It is not something to fear, but something to understand, something to respect. The earth is not angry. It is simply alive. And you, for the first time, feel the quiet power of that truth. You listen a little more carefully now. You tread with more awareness. And as your thoughts begin to fade into sleep, you wonder what happens next. As the magma chamber swells, and the pressure grows, and the balance holds. For now, you'll explore that next breath in the chapter to come. Asterisk, the earth is not angry. It is simply alive. And you, for the first time, feel the quiet power of that truth. You listen a little more carefully now. You tread with more awareness. And as your thoughts begin to fade into sleep, you wonder what happens next as the magma chamber swells and the pressure grows and the balance holds. For now, so, let us go deeper. You return to that warmth beneath your feet, not with fear, but with curiosity. You imagine standing above the vast hidden space where magma gathers. It's not a chamber made of bricks or steel, but of living stone, slowly sculpted over time by heat and pressure. You may picture a giant cauldron, but it's more than that. It is a pulse point of the planet, a basin of change being shaped from the inside out. At first, this chamber is only a widening, a soft weakening in the crust. Perhaps it begins at a boundary between plates, or in a spot thinned by ancient rifting. Beneath it, molten rock from the mantle starts to rise, not rushing, not erupting, but seeping upward, pulled by slight differences in density, temperature, and pressure. This magma is not yet explosive. It is thick, rich, and heavy with silicates and gases, and it carries the fingerprint of the Earth's deep interior that the magma gathers. It does not fill a perfect bowl, but rather winds its way into spaces carved over millennia, pressing into faults, melting its surroundings, and pushing outward ever so slowly. As it enters this nascent chamber, something miraculous happens. It begins to change. It cools slightly, and in doing so, it starts to crystallize. Tiny mineral structures form like frost on a window, creating a delicate skeleton within the melt. This crystallization isn't just a side effect, changes the magma's very behavior. As crystals form, they remove heavier elements from the melt, leaving behind a lighter, more buoyant liquid. You may not see it, but the magma is sorting itself, becoming more evolved, more volatile, more ready. Like a breath, deepening with each inhale, the magma becomes lighter, more prone to rise. More insistent, gases begin to build: carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and water vapor. They dissolve into the melt like sugar into tea, invisible for now, but waiting. And the more magma that arrives, the more pressure these gases create. The chamber swells, not just in size, but in potential. It presses upward, testing the strength of the rock above. The earth, patient and ancient, lets it happen. You can imagine this chamber as a balloon beneath the crust, inflating, slowly, imperceptibly. But, instead of rubber, its walls are stone, fractured and faulted, bending with strain. Seismologists, those who listen to the tremors of the earth, can sometimes detect this inflation. The land above may lift by mere centimeters. And yet, those tiny changes whisper of something growing large below. Yellowstone is such a place. The land there breathes. Some years it rises. Some years it sinks. Scientists use satellites and GPS sensors to track this movement, creating time-lapse maps of a living surface. It's not dramatic, but it is revealing. It tells a story of accumulation, of swelling, of a system preparing, but on a timeline so slow it barely fits into human attention. And still, the magma rises. Every drop that enters the chamber adds heat, volume, and pressure. Sometimes, a pulse of new magma arrives hotter, more primitive, straight from the mantle. When that happens, it mixes with a cooler, older magma already present. This mixing can destabilize the system, like adding boiling water to a glass already full of warm liquid. The whole balance shifts. New convection currents form inside the chamber, swirling heat and gases, thickening the soup. You might wonder, why doesn't it just erupt right away? Why does it wait? The answer is both simple and profound. Because the earth is not in a hurry. The rock above is still strong, enough to hold. The gases are still dissolved. The balance, though stressed, still holds. And so, the chamber keeps growing, reshaping itself, deepening its complexity. Sometimes, the rock around it melts further, expanding the space. Other times, the pressure causes rock to crack and slide, forming a more jagged container. And with each of these changes, the chamber becomes more than a container. It becomes an engine, fueled by pressure, geometry, chemistry, and time. Imagine standing inside it, if such a thing were possible. You would see dark, glowing rock, swirling rivers of molten stone, crystals glinting like stars caught in magma, gases fizzing and bubbling like the inside of a storm cloud. This is not a place of chaos, though it may appear so. It is a place of intricate, precise preparation, a place where forces invisible to daily life are quietly weaving the possibility of a future event so large it could reshape continents. Scientists study these systems using tools both delicate and vast. They drill into the crust, analyze gases escaping from vents, listen to the Earth's micro-earthquakes, and scan deep beneath the surface using seismic tomography. What they find is not certainty, but suggestion, a picture built of echoes and fragments. They know when a chamber is inflating. They know when gas content is rising, but they cannot say exactly when the balance will tip. Because that moment, the critical points hidden deep in complexity. What they do know is that magma chambers like these can grow for hundreds of thousands of years. They can remain silent for most of human history, holding their breath. And then, sometimes, they erupt, not because of something dramatic, but because of one final, small shift, the collapse of a roof segment, a sudden quake, a pulse of new magma too large to absorb. But that is not this chapter's moment. This is the moment of build-up, of gathering, of preparation so vast and slow it nearly defies imagination. And yet, beneath your feet, it is happening. You begin to sense this, not as threat, but as truth. The Earth is a system of memory and movement, of pauses and pulses. This chamber is not a monster, it is a mirror, a reflection of the planet's ability to hold energy, to store heat, to wait. And like all things that wait, it will, one day, act. The word supervolcano may sound like fiction, but it is grounded in fact. These systems are real. Their chambers are measurable. Their histories are etched into ash beds and rock layers, and buried forests turned to stone. They are not born in fire, but in slow, molten thought, in geological patience, in the architecture of preparation. And so, as you lie still now, letting your mind float above this hidden cauldron, you begin to understand something deeper. This is not chaos, it is design. This is not panic. It is a pattern. The magma does not hurry. The Earth does not rush. But it remembers, it gathers. And eventually, it will speak. But not tonight. Tonight, the chamber continues to fill. The gases continue to build. The rock continues to bend. And you are simply here, listening, learning, letting your thoughts move as slowly as the molten stone below. The Earth is building something vast, and it does so without noise, without warning, with infinite patience. And as you begin to drift toward sleep, a quiet question begins to form in your mind. Not when will it erupt, But how will it know that the time has come? That is the question you will carry into the next chapter. Asterisk, but not tonight. Tonight, the chamber continues to fill. The gases continue to build. The rock continues to bend. And you are simply here, listening, learning, letting your thoughts move. As slowly as the molten stone below, the earth is building something vast, and it does so without noise, without warning, with infinite patience. And as you begin to drift toward sleep, a quiet question begins to form in your mind. Not when will it erupt, but how will it know that the time has come? That is the question you carry now into the deep, slow stillness of this next chapter. You begin to feel a taut, invisible push, so gentle and steady that it could almost be mistaken for calm. But it is not calm, it is pressure. And pressure, unlike chaos, does not need to shout. It only needs to exist. It hums through the stone beneath you, a constant, growing insistence from within the earth's molten heart. You feel it, not as fear, but as awareness, a kind of whisper that travels through kilometers of crust, unnoticed by most, but present always. This is not the kind of pressure that slams or cracks. It builds like breath behind closed lips, like the stillness before speech. Like a rising tide beneath ice, the chamber you visited before is no longer quiet in the same way. It still swells in silence, but that silence has changed. It is more tense now, more watchful. The gases that once dissolved calmly into magma now begin to separate, to form bubbles. This process is called exsolution, when gas begins to break, free from the molten mixture, and with every bubble, pressure increases. Not dramatically, but definitely, quietly, persistently. You imagine the magma now as a carbonated drink left sealed in a warm bottle, motionless to the eye, but dense with pressure inside. Shaking it would not reveal the danger immediately, but the potential is there, waiting, pressing outward. Each gas molecule that joins a bubble adds to that invisible push, creating pockets of force beneath the crust. And the crust, for all its strength, is a living thing, brittle in places, ductile in others. It holds for now, but it listens too. Scientists track this pressure in subtle ways, through deformation of the land above, through changes in gas composition at fumaroles and vents, through seismic echoes that bounce through the chamber's walls. They don't hear screaming, they hear humming, that slow, rising murmur that tells them the system is not resting. It's leaning, and leaning is the beginning of letting go. This pressure is not uniform. In one place, the rock might be thicker, older, more stubborn. In another, faults may weaken the ceiling of the chamber like hairline cracks in porcelain. The pressure finds these places. It moves toward weakness, not with violence, but with certainty. Rock yields in silence long before it fractures in sound. You may wonder, how long can this continue? The answer is as long as it must. The Earth doesn't measure time the way we do. Years and centuries are small units here. What matters is not the clock, but the balance. And right now, that balance is delicate. You imagine the chamber as a growing heart, swollen with molten blood, its rhythm slow and steady. Each beat is a new pulse of gas, a new shift in crystal structure, a new grain of instability. You can't see it, but you can feel it, the pressure accumulating with all the patience of deep time. It does not need to rush because it knows that eventually something will give. Sometimes the buildup reaches a kind of pause, a plateau in activity, a false quiet. The magma cools slightly, stabilizes, the land settles. Scientists call this a dormancy phase, but they do so with caution, because dormancy does not mean peace. It only means waiting, and pressure, once gathered, does not forget. Think of a rubber band stretched slowly over hours. It doesn't snap the moment it's pulled. It waits until the threshold is crossed, and only then does it break. The Earth works the same way. Stress accumulates, pressure increases, and then, when the system can no longer hold, it ruptures. But what causes that rupture? Not always the magma itself. Sometimes it's an external event, earthquake nearby, a shift in tectonic plates, the melting of ice from the surface that lifts weight off the crust. These triggers don't add pressure, they remove support. And in doing so, they let the system know the time is near. Yet here, in this moment, the rupture hasn't come. The pressure is only speaking, quietly, persuasively, and you feel it now, not as danger, but as dialogue. The magma is speaking to the rock above. It presses gently against the crust, reminding it of its limits. And the crust answers, not with words, but with tiny fractures, microscopic shifts, small sounds only the Earth can hear. You wonder what it would feel like to stand on that ground, a surface that appears still, while miles below, gases are coalescing, pushing outward, testing their boundaries. To the eye, nothing changes. But to the Earth, everything is in motion. The pressure builds with purpose, not recklessness. Every molecule that moves is part of a system governed by physics, by chemistry, by balance. The magma does not wish to destroy it, simply obeys the laws of its nature. Pressure moves toward release, just as water seeks the lowest path, just as breath eventually must be exhaled. And so the Earth prepares. It prepares not with sirens, but with silence, not with cracks, but with curves in stone. The land may rise slightly, the heat may shift, gas may whisper from a distant vent. These are not warnings. They are signs of a system doing what it has always done: balance energy until it cannot anymore. You lie back now, imagining yourself above such a place. The sky is blue, the ground is quiet. People live their lives unaware of the slow tension gathering beneath them. And perhaps that is okay. The earth is not cruel. It is simply complex, and its pressure is not anger, it is memory becoming motion. Supervolcanoes are not about eruption. They are about accumulation. The long, slow building of pressure that needs no drama, no fanfare. Just time. Just persistence. You may not feel it every day, but it is there. In the hum beneath the mountain. In the silence that isn't still. In the spaces where pressure rises and the earth holds its breath. For now, it holds. But there will come a moment to shift, too small to see. A crack too deep to measure when holding is no longer possible. And then the pressure will do what all pressure does. It will ask for release. You are not there yet, but you are close. You breathe slowly, and with each breath, you imagine the earth beneath you doing the same. Inhale magma rising. Exhale gases forming. Inhale crust bending. Exhale faults awakening. This is not fear. This is understanding. And just as pressure changes the earth, it changes your awareness too. You begin to see that nothing explodes without first enduring immense restraint. That behind every sudden event, there is a long, patient silence. And sometimes it is the silence that holds the most power. You close your eyes and feel it again, that hum that runs through stone. It is not shouting. It is not warning. It is simply there. Always there. Waiting, rising, and in the next chapter, you'll follow that rising force as it moves upward, not yet an eruption, but a force shaping the ceiling above, testing the strength of the rock that must one day decide. Can it still hold, or must it now fall? Asterisk, you begin where the pressure hums, beneath the ceiling of rock that holds the world above. Down here, nothing is loud. Nothing explodes. It whispers instead. The magma is not just hot, it is articulate. It does not use words. It has no voice. You can hear with your ears, but it speaks all the same in the only way Earth has ever known how to speak, through motion, through pattern, through change. And slowly, you begin to understand that it is not silence at all. The chamber is telling a story in heat and time. It begins with texture. You reach out, not with hands, but with attention, and feel the difference between one part of the chamber and another. The walls are not uniform. Some places pulse with heat, others cool, just enough to allow crystals to form. These crystals, growing slowly in the melt, change the story. They are not just leftovers. They are punctuation, shifts in tone. As they grow, they remove some of the lighter elements, water, carbon dioxide, and these gases rise, forming bubbles within the magma like breaths trapped in stone. Each bubble is a whisper of intention, a sign that the magma is growing more buoyant, more eager to move. The magma becomes lighter as the bubbles gather. It is strange, you think, that heat can create lightness, and that lightness pushes upward, not because it wants to, but because it must. The magma is not climbing with ambition. It is simply following the rules of the earth, rules written in density and gravity, in silence and inevitability. But as it moves, it changes. It cools. Crystals grow thicker. The magma slows, then thickens, then whispers again in a new voice. You learn that the magma story is not a straight one. It loops and rewrites itself, depending on how much gas escapes and how much remains. If too much gas is trapped, the pressure builds, and the chamber grows restless. If the gas escapes gently through cracks or porous rock, then the pressure may ease, but nothing is certain. The chamber has no clock. It waits, it shifts, it changes its mind 1,000 times before deciding what to do. It is not planning an eruption. It is simply being molten, ancient, complex. A language spoken. In patience, the gases are the secret code. They carry messages upward, tiny scouts that travel ahead of the magma. You imagine them like delicate messengers rising through fractures in the rock, surfacing at strange places on the earth. Sometimes they reach a hot spring or a fumarole, and there they release their messages to the air: sulfur, carbon, steam. Scientists on the surface read these signs like you now read the chamber, slowly, carefully, with reverence. The gases tell us what is happening far below, in the dark where no instrument can go. The magma is speaking, and we must learn to listen, not just with machines, but with imagination. And so, you begin to listen more deeply. The way the magma moves, slow in some places, fast in others, creates textures like silk or honey or glass. Silica, the mineral that makes up glass, is part of the magma's grammar. High silica magma is thick, reluctant to flow, quick to trap gas. It writes in sharp lines, in fragments and breaks. Low silica magma is gentle and runny, easygoing, like a sentence that never stops. Supervolcanoes, you learn, are fluent in high silica magma. They speak in thicker tongues. Their magma holds its breath longer. And when it releases everything. You trace the veins inside the chamber. They look like lightning, frozen. In stone, the branching paths where magma once moved or cooled. Some are leftovers from ancient intrusions. Some are new, trying to push through. These veins are memory, the fossilized sentences of past conversations between rock and fire. Each one marks a moment when the earth nearly spoke, but changed its mind. You begin to see how often the planet holds back, how often it pauses just before breaking, how many near eruptions never come. The magma is never quiet because it is done, only because it is thinking. You close your eyes and imagine being inside the melt. Not just beside it, but part of it. You would feel yourself stretch, heat, dissolve. You would lose your edges. You would feel the rise in pressure, not as danger, but as purpose. You would not fear eruption. You would simply know that your time to move had arrived. And then you would rise, slow and glowing, toward the ceiling above, toward the place where earth and sky meet. But not yet. Not now. Because something is happening within the chamber. The top begins to bulge, slightly, invisibly to the naked eye. But if you listen closely, you can feel the change in tension. It is like the breath before speech. Like the throat tightening before a note. The magma has something to say. Not in fire. Not yet, but in force. The ground above is no longer resting. It is being tested, and still, the language continues, in chemistry, in flow, in the way crystals form and gas escapes. You notice that the melt becomes more layered. Over time, denser at the bottom, lighter at the top. These layers are not accidental. They are syntax. They guide how pressure travels. They decide what rises first and what waits. You see now that a supervolcano does not speak in a single sentence. It speaks in chapters, each layer a new thought, a new possibility. Somewhere in the upper part of the chamber, new magma arrives. It is hotter, younger, restless. It pushes into the older melt like a sudden idea, interrupting a dream. The temperature rises. The gas content increases. You can almost feel the difference, not with your skin, but with your intuition. The chamber becomes unstable, not because it is broken, but because it is crowded with new messages that haven't yet found their place. The magma stirs, and with that stirring comes motion, not enough to break through the crust, but enough to reshape it from below. The ground above begins to lift, just a little. Maybe a few millimeters each year, but it's there. A soft bulge, a rise in breath. You imagine a sleeping giant turning slightly in its sleep. Not waking, not yet, but dreaming something louder. On the surface, instruments begin to pick up subtle changes. Tilt meters register the bulge. Gas monitors detect more sulfur in the air. Thermal satellites notice heat pulses in certain regions. The Earth is beginning to show its thoughts above ground. The language of the magma is no longer confined to the chamber. It is leaking into the world, and now you understand why this chapter must be told in whispers. Because this is the part of the story most often missed. The rise before the release, the soft signs that come before any crack or quake or collapse. The magma is preparing, but it is not screaming. It never screams. It only speaks in pressure, in gases, in chemistry, in shape. You feel the weight of this knowledge, not as fear, but as awe. That deep inside the earth, there is a story always being told. That the surface of the planet quiet, and solid beneath. Your feet is only the final page of something much longer, much older, still being written. You walk across the crust every day without thinking of what pulses underneath. But now you know. Now you hear it. The magma is not just molten rock. It is memory, movement, and language, the oldest voice on Earth. You sit quietly with this thought. Let it settle into you like warmth from below. The magma is not trying to harm. It is simply trying to move. It gathers because that is its nature. It speaks because it must. It breaks through because the conversation becomes too large to hold inside. And when it can no longer speak in whispers, when the pressure beneath becomes too heavy, too layered, too persistent, that is when the ground above must answer. That is when the crust, brittle and tired, begins to fracture. But not yet. Not now, for tonight, the chamber still holds. The pressure still hums, and the magma, in all its molten wisdom, continues to speak softly in bubbles and veins and temperature and time. And if you press your ear to the stone and listen closely enough, you just might hear it shaping the ceiling above, testing, stretching, preparing the next word in a sentence, millions of years in the making. Asterisk, above the molten breath that still simmers in silence, above the whispers of magma and its ancient tongue, the ground lies quiet. You walk across it each day barefoot on soil or shoes tapping against pavement tanned. Never think of the strain beneath. But tonight, you pause. You place your hand on a stone still warm from the sun, and you wonder what lies just below. Not miles and miles beneath, but just deep enough for the earth to remember it is not unbroken. Just deep enough for the first cracks to begin. There, the crust begins to feel the slow arithmetic of pressure. It is not a sudden breaking knot. Yet, instead, the tension builds in ways too subtle for your senses to grasp. Rock bends, stretches, and then hesitates. In the chamber below, the magma speaks in thermal sighs and rising gas. But here, above, the language is different. Here, the earth murmurs in fractures, tiny, hair-lined fissures, like porcelain under strain. These fractures do not scream, they whisper. 1,000 microscopic changes trace themselves across the ceiling of the chamber, each one a tiny negotiation between what holds and what yields. You imagine the earth like a sleeping body curling slightly in its bed. It shifts, it tightens, it breathes, and somewhere inside that breath, something forgets how to stay whole. The crust is not a monolith. It is a mosaic of plates and segments and brittle patches shaped by age and accident. Like a puzzle held together by old memory and pressure. And under the influence of the chamber below, this puzzle begins to slip. Sometimes it's the weight above that matters. Mountain ranges, dense with time, pressing down like a parent's steady hand. Sometimes it's the release of ice glaciers melting, lifting their cold weight allowing the crust to float upward in rebound. And sometimes it's nothing from the surface at all. Sometimes it is only the magma swelling upward like a question no longer willing to stay quiet. You think of glass being bent. How long can it hold? How much curve before the snap? This is what the earth is asking of itself now. The rock above is cool, but not invincible. The fractures begin first as thermal stress, hot rising from below, cold holding from above, expansion and resistance, motion and refusal. The kind of slow battle that wears mountains down, and it is not random. Fractures trace their fingers along the lines of history. Fault lines, those ancient scars, become highways for pressure. Old weaknesses return, not as failings, but as paths of least resistance. A crack remembers where it once broke. It returns. You are lying now, still and listening. The sky is deepening to its blue-black hush. But beneath your back, under the grasses and roots and stones, there is movement. Not loud, not fast, but persistent. The chamber's heat is reaching higher now, expanding gently. It is testing, stretching. Not to break the earth, but to ask it if it will. Some days there is no sign. Others, the ground may rise, just a little. Swell, as though the earth is taking a breath it cannot release. You may see it in satellite images, in slow-bending trees, in roads that arc subtly toward the sky. But these are signs for those who watch closely. To most, the earth seems still, and then a crack widens. Just a little. A micro-earthquake ripples through the stone, too small for most to feel. A vibration more than a sound, like a sigh escaping from a sleeping mouth. You begin to understand. It is not the magma that erupts first. It is the ceiling above it that falls apart. The earth loses its balance, not with a roar, but with a sigh of surrender. This surrender begins with dikes-thin sheets of magma that work their way upward, like the veins of a leaf, exploiting the smallest fractures. They slip quietly, inching through rock-like ink, through paper, not explosive, not yet, just present, just climbing. These dikes widen fractures as they go, pushing rock aside, molecule. Every upward movement is another test. Every new crack is a question to the crust. How long can you hold me? And the answer is never final. It shifts. It hesitates. Sometimes it strengthens. Other times it yields asterisk above the brittle crust bears. This pressure in silence. But silence does not mean peace. You think of old wood under strain. The way it doesn't break right away. The way it creaks first. That is what this sounds like, if only you could hear the earth's creaking breath. The deeper the fracture grows, the more likely the ceiling is to fail. The magma below may still be waiting, patient, molten, but the surface above has a different timeline. It cannot wait forever. And when you look around, at mountains, at valleys, at ancient calderas sunken into plains, you begin to see the signs. This has happened before. The earth remembers. Every crack is a memory. Every fault line, a story of when it let go. You imagine yourself walking along a caldera's rim. You do not see fire. You see silence. You see grass growing in the hollow of what once fell. You see trees reclaiming ash. But under your feet, the fracture remains, quiet and sleeping. Somewhere, at this very moment, there is another ceiling being tested. Not to threaten, just to remember that it is not invincible. Fractures are not failures. They are part of the breathing process. The earth must inhale, must hold, must sometimes exhale through stone, and so cracks widen. Some will heal, sealing, shut with cooling magma or mineral-rich water. Others will stretch further. Crust does not know in advance which path it will choose, but it knows how to tremble. A larger quake may come. Perhaps not soon, perhaps only once in 100 years. But the groundwork has been laid. The ceiling is thinner. The magma is closer. The story is moving forward. You press your hand to the soil again. There is no heat here, not yet. But you can almost feel the tension. It is not fear. It is awareness. The awareness of something vast beneath something fragile. The awareness that stillness is not the same as safety. Tonight, you sleep on that stillness, but your dreams drift downward. Through sediment, through stone, through older rock carved by time. You pass through the fractures, slipping between planes of pressure. Listening to the conversation between weight and release. And as you pass through, you wonder what it means to hold something too long. To bear pressure without release. The crust is asking the same question. Somewhere in that silence, a crack deepens. Another dike finds its path. The ceiling flexes again. And so the earth forgets, just for a moment, how to hold itself together. But only a moment. It still holds. The chamber does not burst. The sky does not yet darken. Not yet. Not now. The magma waits. The pressure builds. And you lie quietly above it all, held by a world learning where its limits lie. You breathe with the earth. Each inhale a soft tremor. Each exhale a quiet relief. The fractures are part of its rhythm now, and soon you'll come to see what happens. When something from outside, the unexpected knock, the tremble from another fault, tips the balance. When the fractures find their trigger. When the sleeping system is stirred. But for now, you sleep. And the earth listens, just as you do, too. The slow fracturing above. You rest above the sleeping chamber, lulled by its pressure, its warmth, its quiet refusal to yield too soon. But the earth is not a single voice. It is a chorus. It does not fracture only from within. It listens. 2 footsteps it cannot control. Footsteps from the sky, from the crust, from deep along its ribs of stone. And sometimes those footsteps knock just hard enough to change everything. A quake stirs somewhere far from the chamber. Nothing more than a sigh in the spine of a fault. It travels like a murmur, unnoticed by most. But below, where the magma presses gently against its ceiling, the vibration reaches. It is small, a whisper brushing the skin of stone. But when the earth is already weary, already stretched thin by time and pressure, even a whisper can split it open. The crust above a supervolcano is not a fortress. It is a tired ceiling, held together by memory and tension. When a tectonic plate shifts, when continents nudge each other like old bones shifting in sleep, the vibrations ripple through the mantle and crust, unsettling the balance. Earthquakes, often blamed for their noise and destruction, are sometimes merely the messengers. They carry not rage, but invitation. You imagine it now, two plates, long separated, grinding close in the dark. Their movement is ancient, as slow as growth in a forest, but the energy they store is real. When they release that energy, the crust shakes. And if the crust above the magma chamber is already fractured, already singing with tension, this shake becomes more than a tremble. It becomes permission. Far above, a glacier melts, not quickly, but inevitably. Its retreat is gentle, like frost lifting from glass. But that melting lifts weight from the crust. Kilometers of ice, pressing for millennia, now thinning. This, too, matters. The pressure above disappears, and the magma below, no longer held back, rises a little more freely. What once was sealed becomes slightly more open. And in a system as delicate as this, even slightly means everything. You learn now how. The surface and the deep are forever linked. A warming sky can stir a chamber underground. A distant fault line can nudge a fragile roof. Even rainfall, gathered over years, can percolate downward, changing temperatures, creating steam, expanding cracks. You see how fragile the balance is, and how wide the web of influence becomes. Triggers do not need to be violent. They only need to be well-timed. In some places, scientists speak of isostatic rebound, a poetic phrase for something simple. Remove a glacier, and the land below rises, not quickly, not visibly, but steadily over years. It is the Earth's way of exhaling. But in rising, the crust stretches. And if that crust happens to sit above a restless reservoir of magma, the stretch is felt below. The pressure may already be near its tipping point. That little stretch, a millimeter here, a hairline there, may be all the magma needs to surge upward. You begin to understand the subtlety. A supervolcano is not waiting for disaster. It is waiting for opportunity. It builds over time, slowly, patiently, almost reverently. But once built, it is susceptible. And the triggers are never theatrical. They arrive quietly, a tremble, a thaw, a shift. You see now that the earth is never still, not truly, and that even stillness can move mountains when the balance is delicate enough. In Yellowstone, one of Earth's most studied supervolcanoes, scientists have tracked the crust rising and falling like breath. Some years it lifts, other years it sinks. They read the land like a pulse, not frantic, but living. The measurements are measured in centimeters, yet they tell a story that spans eons. Beneath those soft rises is a chamber, vast and complex, watching for changes above. You picture it now. A slow quake moves through a fault 200 kilometers away. The pressure wave, like a ripple on a pond, travels unseen. It reaches the edge of a weakened chamber. A pre-existing fracture, nearly ready to widen, gives way. It's a crack, not a collapse. But the crack lets gas escape. Gas that was keeping the system stable. And when that gas escapes, the pressure shifts. A new phase begins. The magma responds in silence. It doesn't surge yet, but it breathes differently. It expands into the space newly made. The overlying rock, now less supported, begins to sag. All because of a quake you couldn't hear in a place you couldn't see. This is how supervolcanoes are awakened, not with alarm bells, but with soft suggestions. You see now how external forces are not intrusions. They are collaborators. The Earth is a system of echoes where no movement ends in isolation. A glacier melting in Iceland, a quake rumbling in Nepal, the weight of water shifting in a seasonal lake. These can all join the rhythm of magma below, in the Andes, in Topo, in Toba, in the long shadows of ancient eruptions. Geologists find evidence not just of magma buildup, but of something small that came just before. An earthquake, a landslide, a crustal sag. The final gesture was not dramatic, but it tipped the scale. You feel that balance now, fragile as breath between sleeping and waking. You wonder how many systems are near their edge, not erupting, just waiting, held in check, not by strength, but by stillness. A stillness that cannot last forever. And so, the Earth watches itself. One part nudges another. One event calls to the next. And you, lying above it all, are part of the story, too. Your presence, your warmth, your footprints even, are soft echoes in the crust. Your world is not separate from these forces. You live on their skin. Back below, the chamber feels every shift, every quake, every melt, every movement. It absorbs them. Not all changes trigger eruption. Some simply reshape the timeline, delay, advance, alter the path. But each trigger leaves its mark, like a whisper left in a diary written in stone. There is science here, quiet and powerful. Seismographs picking up tremors. Satellites measuring land lift. Ice cores tracking melt. Rock layers reading pressure. The Earth is writing its story in data, and we are learning how to read. Each signal, however small, may be the beginning of something vast, and so you begin to think not in terms of eruptions, but in thresholds. You feel how close everything is all the time to transformation. It humbles you. It makes you listen, because when change comes, it may not look like disaster at first. It may just be a soft knock, a drop in pressure, a subtle rise in land, a silence that wasn't there yesterday, and sometimes that's all it takes. The sky grows dim in your thoughts now, the way it might after ash touches the clouds, but not yet. For now, the ash is still waiting. The chamber still holds, but the world around it no longer does. The system, once sealed by weight and silence, now listens to tremors and melt. The ceiling above no longer simply fractures, it begins to interact. The walls feel thinner, the signals feel louder. The chain is beginning to tug itself forward. You feel it in your breath again, that echo. The earth is shifting inside and out. You are part of it, not outside it, not above it, but within its rhythm. And soon, in the next chapter, you will come to that narrow place, the moment where balance gives way to insistence, where the earth no longer asks, where the threshold is crossed, where the deep force, once only pressing, begins to move, but not yet. For tonight, you rest in the quiet before the break. You lie between the triggers and the tipping point, between the whisper and the roar, and all around you, the earth listens, waiting for the sound that comes just before the breath. There comes a moment when the earth stops whispering. You feel it long before it happens, not with your ears, but with the quiet inside you. The rhythm of the land that once hummed gently beneath your skin begins to hold its breath. The tremors you once felt as background music goes silent, not because the pressure has disappeared, but because it has gathered like a wave pulling back before it rises. This is not a pause of peace. It is the stillness of something that has made up its mind. Beneath you, the magma no longer negotiates. It does not ask the crust if it is ready. It no longer tests. It insists. The chamber has been growing for millennia, fed by melt, by gas, by heat rising from the depths of the mantle. Its roof has cracked, its walls stretched, its boundaries pushed outward like the skin of a drum pulled too tight. The fractures from above have deepened, one by one, not as wounds, but as windows. And now they are open enough to let something through. You lie there, still and listening, as the first deep breath is drawn. This is the threshold, the moment between becoming and release. It is not loud, not yet. It is precise. It is weight and pressure and timing in perfect alignment. Magma has reached a point where its buoyancy overcomes the resistance of the surrounding rock. It has always wanted to rise. Magma is less dense than the crust above it. always seeking the surface, but the rock above has always said no. Until now. Now, the answer is yes. Or at least, no longer no. Crystals within the chamber begin to align. Gas bubbles coalesce and stretch. The temperature increases, but not like a fever, more like a memory returning to the body. The magma remembers its path. It remembers how to move. It begins to push. Above the chamber, the fractures respond. They widen. They link. The tiny tremors become coordinated, like footsteps echoing down a hallway. The earth is not shattering, it is unfolding. The brittle crust, already tired from all it has held back, begins to shift. And you feel it not as violence, but as decision. The earth has decided to exhale. Supervolcanoes do not erupt because they are angry. They erupt because there is no other option. The pressure is too great, the containment too thin. What once held now releases. The threshold is not crossed with force, it is crossed with inevitability. Think of a dam, full of water, behind walls, engineered for centuries. Every droplet that pressed against the stone was a question. And now, one final drop is enough. The wall does not fall with a shout. It dissolves inward and then outward, giving way to what could no longer be held. You have reached that drop. The ceiling above the magma collapses inward in slow motion. The pressure does not explode upward, right? A wind pulls the roof down first into the chamber, as though the earth is inhaling one last time. That collapse sends shockwaves. It opens the path further. The overlying rock falls into the void left by moving magma. And then, finally, it begins. But not all at once. The eruption is not a single breath, is a series of movements, layers of release. First, the vent opens, often multiple vents across the caldera. Then ash and gas race skyward, faster than sound, faster than birds. The earth is not just breathing, it is speaking in a voice it has not used in hundreds of thousands of years, and still. You lie within it, not separate from the story, but part of the air that carries it. The thresholds of eruption are not measured in seconds. They are processes unfolding over hours, days, sometimes weeks. But there is a beginning, a place in time when the magma no longer stays still, when the chamber is no longer a chamber, but a highway. That is where you are now. You feel the pull. You feel the moment where balance tips into motion. Scientists call this a critical state, a point where a system so finely tuned becomes chaotic. Not in the sense of confusion, but in the sense that small inputs can lead to vast consequences. The pressure, the fractures, the external triggers, they align. And once that alignment is reached, nothing can stop it. It's like a match in a dry forest. The match itself is small, but once lit, the fire follows its own path. You think of Yellowstone, of Toba, of Topo. Each name is a memory etched in ash and silence. Each once crossed this same threshold. Each began with a moment like this unassuming tilt, a quiet break, a final breath. In the days leading up to such eruptions, animals grow restless. Birds leave their nests. Deer change their routes. The ground may bulge, just slightly, like a heartbeat against the soil. Geysers pulse more erratically. The air itself smells different, touched by sulfur and something older. And then, a sound, not loud at first. A deep, resonant groan. The kind of sound you feel in your ribs more than your ears. It's the earth adjusting, like a sleeper stretching in their bed after too long still. You are lying in that bed now, tucked within the crust, aware of the sleeper's breath. The air above you stills. The wind pauses. The earth holds its lungs full. The eruption has not yet begun, but it has nowhere else to go. In the chamber, crystals melt. Gases expand. The magma becomes more mobile, less syrupy, more explosive. Viscosity drops. Pressure climbs. The chamber is transforming, not just in heat, but in personality. What was once slow becomes fast. What was once restrained becomes expressive. You feel it in the ground beneath your back. The readiness, the irreversible dot. This is the threshold, not just of eruption, but of change. What will rise cannot return. What will be lost cannot be rebuilt in one lifetime. Supervolcanoes do not simply erupt. They reset landscapes. They rewrite ecosystems. They challenge civilizations, and yet the story is not one of doom. It is one of transformation. The ash that falls will one day nourish soil. The skies that darken will one day clear. Life will return in forms both familiar and new. The threshold is painful, but it is also passage. And you, lying still in this fragile hour, understand that fully now. The earth is not punishing, is releasing. And what comes next is not destruction, it is recreation in slow and sacred time. You hear it now. That first deep exhale. Not all eruptions begin with a roar. Some begin with silence. Stretched too long, the magma moves. The crust yields. Asterisk, and the world changes shape. But for now, you remain in this breathless pause. The moment between pressure and release, between silence and sound, between being held and being let go, you feel the weight of the sky. You feel the breath of the stone. You feel the earth ready. And in the next chapter, you will follow that breath upward, into the plume, into the ash, into the sky itself. There is no fire, not yet. What comes first is the folding, a slow, immense giving way. The ground that once held firm no longer resists. The roof of the chamber, stretched thin from below, buckles inward, unable to bear the hollow space beneath it. You do not hear it crack like glass. You feel it sigh. The earth does not explode upward in rage. It sinks, drawn in by its own emptiness. This is the birth of a caldera, not a burst, but a surrender. Not an act of rage, but of release. You lie still as the land above caves in. From the outside, it may look like a landslide, or the top of a mountain vanishing in slow collapse. But from within, it is something deeper, the surface folding into itself like a wave curling over, pulled by forces it cannot resist. The chamber that once held its breath is now losing its shape, and the land above no longer floats. It falls, it begins subtly. Cracks widen, soil slumps, trees lean as if listening. Then whole sections of earth descend, quietly and completely. The land you once walked is becoming a bowl. The ceiling is becoming the floor. And you, resting within this shifting crust, can feel the downward motion like a tide dot. It is not violent at first, it is graceful, like cloth collapsing in water, like the skin of the earth settling into a deeper shape. But with it comes something else, darkness. Ash begins to rise, pulled not just by heat, but by space. The sudden vacuum left by collapse. When land falls, air rushes in, and when magma escapes, it pulls the sky with it. Ash, gas, steam, pressure. A pillar forms above the opening, a column taller than mountains, rising into the atmosphere. It climbs not like smoke from a chimney, but like a tree of flame drawn upward by its roots. The eruption, now truly begun, takes shape not from fire alone, but from emptiness, from the fall of the land into the belly of the earth. You are there, not watching from afar, but within the rhythm, within the slow catastrophe that is both ending and beginning. The caldera deepens, the sky darkens, and you lie between them, part of both. To understand this, you must forget the word explosion. This is implosion, followed by release. Collapse, followed by flight. Creation by subtraction. The mountain does not rise, it falls, and in falling, it gives way to something new, the gases within the magma. Once compressed by kilometers of stone, now expand at terrifying speed, like foam uncorked, like breath held too long. The chamber that was once a sealed cauldron becomes a throat, and the earth speaks in plumes. You picture the shape from above, a vast basin where a peak once stood, circular, open, quiet, in a way that belies its violence. But inside, nothing is still. Particles fly upward at supersonic speeds. Lightning flickers in the ash. Glass forms in mid-air as droplets of molten rock cool instantly into shards, and the ground beneath continues to settle. Calderas are not made in moments, they are sculpted in days and weeks. As magma evacuates, more roof collapses. As pressure shifts, new faults form. Whole forests may sink. Lakes may vanish. Rivers may reverse their paths. The shape of the land rewrites itself. And you feel those edits in your chest. You think of Toba, where 74,000 years ago, a mountain folded into itself, blanketing the earth in ash. You think of Topo, where a similar collapse sent the sky into fire and the air into silence. These were not just eruptions. They were transformations. You begin to understand that the mountain is not falling down, it is falling in. The collapse is not failure, it is transition. Like a lung exhaling or a heart releasing blood. The energy is not gone, it is moving. Being handed upward, the collapse deepens. What was once highland becomes lowland. What was once firm becomes fluid. The magma chamber shrinks, not just from eruption, but from loss. It is being emptied. And so the earth, above it, empties. Too, you feel the motion not as impact, but as descent. Not falling like a rock, but folding like breath. This is how new landscapes are born, not from growth, but from release. The caldera that forms will one day cradle a lake, or a meadow, or a forest. Life will fill it, but not yet. Bowl of silence, a wound that glows, ash covers everything. The light that filters through is not golden, but gray. Trees sway under its weight. Rivers run thick. The world feels muffled, like snow has fallen over sound itself. But beneath that, ash, seeds remain. Microbes hide. Roots still curl in soil. The earth is not dead. It is resetting, and still the column rises. It reaches the stratosphere, higher than storms. It carries sulfur and glass and stone, wrapped in the heat of the mantle, into the upper layers of the sky. The plume spreads, mushroom-like, casting a shadow across continents. And you, breathing slowly within this stillness, know that the sun will not look the same tomorrow. You have seen it now. The mountain did not burst. It folded. It gave way. It sank into itself to become something else. And in doing so, it changed everything around it. This is not destruction. This is renewal, written in Ashdod. You lie at the edge of the caldera, now. The ground still warm, the sky still dim. You watch the last stones tumble inward. You hear the last echoes of falling earth. You feel the world holding its breath again, not from pressure, but from awe. The plume still rises, but the collapse has slowed. The chamber is emptier. The earth, exhausted, and yet something stirs in the distance. Winds shifting. Waters moving. The ash begins to fall, not just around you, but across the sea. What began in collapse does not end in silence. The world will feel this. The air will change. The oceans will respond. You are no longer inside the mountain. You are inside its echo. And in the next chapter, you will follow that echo outward, into the currents, into the weather, into the climate itself. Asterisk, the mountain has collapsed, but the story is far from over. You lie at the edge of the caldera, where the earth opened and swallowed itself. The sky is not empty, it breathes, and you watch it exhale. A plume rises, tall and twisting, taller than any mountain ever stood. Ash climbs like breath held too long, finally set free, curling into the wind. It does not fall, not yet. First, it soars. Carried by heat, by force, by memory, you are small beneath it, but not insignificant. You are witnessing something only time remembers. A moment that does not fit in a day or a season. This is not an event, it is an atmosphere. The ash is more than dust. It is story and chemistry and consequence. Each particle once sat deep below the surface, part of stone, part of magma, part of pressure. Now it dances in sunlight, catching the gold of the day and turning it to dusk. You blink and wonder, has the sun moved, or has the world simply changed? Kilometer by kilometer, the plume stretches outward. It doesn't stop at the edge of the caldera. It does not ask permission from the trees or the ocean. It rides wind like a river, rippling and spreading across continents. What erupts in one place does not stay there. It echoes in clouds, in rains, in breathing lungs, half a world away. You lie still, and the ash drifts over you. It is light as snow, yet made of fire. It carries fragments of feldspar, shards of glass, whispers of ancient crystals. You could catch one on your fingertip and not feel its weight, but feel its meaning. If you listen closely, the sky begins to shift. It darkens not into night, but into something ancient, tan, amber shadow, like twilight, stretched to thin. Sun glows red, muted, like it too has grown quiet in the face of what the earth has done. You do not fear the dark. You feel its rhythm. This is the kind of dusk that listens. Days pass. The ash keeps rising. Plains ground themselves. Crops begin to wilt, not from cold, not yet, but from the absence of light. Photons scatter differently now. The upper atmosphere carries more than weather carries memory. And the earth, gentle as ever, begins to cool. You see it in the leaves, how they slow their reaching. You feel it in the breeze, how it now longer smells only of pine and soil, but carries something metallic, something distant. The ocean, once warmed by sun, begins to whisper cooler currents. Rain falls with a different sound, sometimes mixed with fine ash, sometimes skipping the ground entirely, caught in swirling winds that do not know where to rest. This is the aftermath. But it is not an ending. It is a transformation. The ash that falls does not destroy it, covers. It silences sound, tides, color, but it also preserves. Beneath its blanket, seeds wait, insects hide. Even the smallest breath of life huddles beneath that pale weight, not extinguished, but paused. And the skies that turned cold. You think of mammoths stepping across frost-covered plains. You think of how many lives have risen after the dark, shaped by what first buried them. Supervolcanoes do not finish with their eruption. They write chapters in the sky, on the land, and in memory. You follow the ash now, not with your feet, but with your thoughts. It crosses oceans. It lands on glaciers. It filters into rainforests. Satellites see its reach, measure it, name its boundaries, but you know better. You know it cannot be contained. What left the earth in that breath has no home to return to. It becomes part of sky, of cloud, of climate, and slowly that sky begins to change the world. Temperatures drop. Not everywhere, not all at once, but measurably. Crops fail in some places. Rain doesn't come when expected. In other places, it floods. The balance of weather so finely tuned tips slightly, and that tip is enough. Civilizations have risen and fallen in such shadows. A failed harvest, a missing summer, a winter too long. These things do not come with eruptions. They come after, like echoes in the bones, like quiet shifts in heartbeat. You lie on the cooling ground, aware of this chain, of cause and consequence, of fire and ash and breath and sky. You do not see chaos. You see balance, reset, a system seeking a new center, a clock finding a slower rhythm in the forests. Silence deepens. Some animals leave, some burrow, some wait, and some are gone. Their paths ended by the smoke they could not fly through, by the cold they did not expect. But even here, life folds into life. What perishes returns. What falls feeds. What rises, and in the sky above you, light begins to change again. Not brighter yet, not clearer, but new. The plume thins. Gravity pulls ash downward. Rain begins to rinse the air. Rivers begin to carry that ash to valleys and fields, into lake beds, into soil. Years will pass before the sky fully clears. Decades before the memory leaves the climate. But one day, a forest will grow in this ash. A child will run across a meadow that once burned. A bird will build its nest in branches rooted in volcanic soil. You know this because you are part of it. Not an observer, but a participant. The ash touches you, and you do not brush it away. You breathe through it. You dream within it. You carry it forward. This is the reach of supervolcanoes, not just through land, but through time. You close your eyes. You feel the warmth of stone beneath your back, finally cool. You feel the weight of the air settle into calm. You listen not for eruption, but for silence, for aftermath. for beginning, because something always follows. And in the next chapter, you will follow what rises next. Not fire this time, not ash, but something invisible, persistent, and endlessly moving. You will follow the winds. You will step into the climate's long echo, and you will hear how the earth continues its conversation. The silence that follows is not the same as before. It is not the hush before the break, not the breath before the roar. This silence is aftermath. This silence is consequence. It settles slowly, like snow, like ash that has run out of sky. The world beneath you exhales, not heat now, but stillness. You lie in a land transformed, not by the violence of fire, but by the absence it leaves behind. The sky is not blue anymore, not fully, not in the way it used to be. It carries a pallor, a pale veil stretched across the dome of the world. High above, invisible to your eye, but present in every direction. A plume of ash and sulfuric gases has spread across the stratosphere like a second skin. Sunlight reaches you less directly now. It arrives, filtered, diffused, dimmed. Shadows no longer carry sharp edges. They blur, as though the light has forgotten its path. This is the beginning of something quiet but immense. Volcanic winter. They call it a strange, soft season, born not from snow, but from the sky's refusal to let warmth through. You do not feel it all at once. It creeps in like a chill you didn't expect, a breeze that lingers too long. The temperature falls, not just here, not just now, but everywhere, over weeks and months, over oceans and forests, over cities that do not yet know what has happened beneath their feet. And you understand, now this eruption was not only local. It was never just about the mountain. What broke open the earth has now reached the sky. And what touched the sky now touches the entire skin of the planet. Tiny particles of ash, invisible sulfur droplets, climb higher than storms, higher than the weather. They ride the winds that never rest, the jet streams that circle the globe like whispered ribbons. These particles reflect sunlight just enough to matter, just enough to change what grows and what doesn't. Fades, the balance shifts. The earth, like a great orchestra, plays a slightly altered tune. You wake to mornings dimmer than before. You notice the plant near you hesitate. Leaves curl differently. Blooms arrive later. Some seeds never wake at all across continents. Monsoons miss their mark. Rain delays its song. Rivers drop or overflow. The sky forgets its rhythms, just enough to confuse the world beneath. Animals adjust. Birds reroute their migrations. Insects hatch early or not at all. Wolves follow colder paths. Bears sleep longer. Soft-skinned and sky-watching, you begin to notice that something intangible has changed the very way the day feels. It is not disaster that falls now. it is drift. History remembers such winters. You may not recall their names, but the echoes remain. Tambor, 1815, when the year without a summer painted frost in June, when crops failed in Europe, when poets wrote of cold sunsets and crimson skies. Locke, 1783, when haze fell over Iceland and hunger walked behind it. Even Toba, so long ago it hides in our DNA, may have darkened skies enough to bottleneck humanity itself. These winters are not always deep freezes. They are distortions. Some places grow colder, others drier, others wetter still. But it is the unpredictability that matters most, the breaking of patterns, the interruption of normal. The earth does not end, but it remembers, and now you are part of that remembering. You move through days shaped by fire you no longer see. The mountain may be silent now. The ash may have fallen, but its voice lingers in every gust, in every unexpected frost, in the way the morning light arrives with a muted hue. You walk through a world slightly misaligned. Trees struggle to track the seasons. Lakes hold ice longer. The horizon looks farther away somehow. And yet, in this altered light, life continues, not defiantly, but curiously. Creatures adapt, humans observe, and the planet does what it always does in the face of change. It listens, adjusts, persists. Scientists study the aerosols. They send up balloons, satellites, simulations. They measure the thickness of the stratospheric veil. They note the sulfur levels. They model temperature, drops, crop yields, rainfall shifts. But the models, as intricate as they are, cannot capture the quiet strangeness of standing in a meadow that should feel like summer and does not, of harvesting late, of watching birds migrate in circles, of realizing the planet's breath has changed tempo. And yet, even now, there is beauty. The sunsets glow with colors no painter could dream. Orange melts into violet. Crimson flares into gold. The sky, dusted with particles, scatters light in ways that feel unreal. You look upward and feel awe, even as your body notices the chill, because the earth is not punishing, it is responding. It is rebalancing after something deep and ancient forced its way upward. The cold that follows fire is not always cruel. It is complex. It is correction. It is the echo of inner heat expressed through outer coolness. The magma chamber collapses, but the atmosphere absorbs its memory. And that memory lingers longer than the eruption itself. Some species struggle, others thrive. A moss in Siberia finds more room to grow. A beetle in Africa misses its timing. Farmers plant later. Storms arrive where they didn't before. The skin of the planet shifts its tone just a little, but enough to be felt. You, too, shift. You dress differently. You eat differently. You watch the news, not for war or economy, but for weather. You realize how much of civilization rests on patterns, knowing when rains will fall, when warmth will return. And now, those patterns have blurred, and still the earth turns. It tilts toward seasons, even if they forget their names. It continues. The cold may linger for a year, or two, or longer, depending on the eruption's breath. But eventually, the ash will settle, the particles will fall. The light will return with its original clarity, but you will not be the same. Not because of disaster, but because you have seen how one breath from the deep earth can touch sky, wind, ocean, and seed. How what lies beneath your feet shapes the air above your head. How fire becomes cold. How eruption becomes memory. And even now, in this cooler world, you find warmth in adaptation, in understanding, in the way trees lean a little differently, in the way communities store food with more care, in the way scientists trace sky trails back to mountain hearts. This is not the end of the story. It is a chapter in the Earth's long conversation with itself. A volcanic winter is not permanent. It is a question the planet asks its own skin. Can you adjust? Can you hold on through this brief forgetting of sun? Asterisk, asterisk, and the answer, whispered through leaf and cloud and creature, is yes. Eventually, the veil begins to thin. The light grows clearer. The seasons begin to remember. Crops find their rhythm again. The balance, never fully as it was, becomes something new. Not restored, but evolved. And you, having walked through the cold that follows fire, know something different now. You know that transformation is not always loud. That the most profound changes come not with eruptions, but with their echoes, with what they teach, with how they shape what follows. You sit beneath a sky that has shed its haze. You look toward a land that carries the mark of ash, but also the green shoots of return. You breathe deeply, knowing the air has carried fire and cold, and now, once again, warmth, and in this breath, in this silence that is no longer aftermath, but beginning, you listen. Because even as the cold fades, the story continues. And in the next chapter, you will follow not the fire or the ash or the chill, but the memory itself. You will follow what remains in the rock, in the rings of trees, in the ice. You will learn how the earth remembers, and you will understand how we, too, remember it. You walk through a land that is quiet now. The ash has settled. The winds have slowed. The light returns not as a sudden blaze, but as a gradual grace, painting the landscape in softened tones. You follow its path, not with urgency, but with curiosity, because what matters now is not the fire that was, but the story it left behind. And the earth, ever patient, has kept the record. You begin to notice the signs. The first are subtle layers in rock, shifts in color, textures that don't quite match the rhythm of the surrounding. Stone, a cliff face crumbles slightly beneath your fingers, revealing a stripe of fine ash caught between older layers of hardened earth. It is pale and soft, even now. And in that thin, fragile seam is a memory of fire. Geologists call these tephra, layers fossilized traces of past eruptions, each one a page in the Earth's long and unfinished diary. Some are just millimeters thick, others stretch 4 meters, spanning entire valleys. And each one tells of a moment when the sky darkened, when the ground opened, when something ancient rose to speak. Asterisk. You crouch beside one such layer and trace it with your fingertips. It feels like time itself compressed, silent, enduring. You wonder how long it took to fall, how far the ash drifted, how wide the plume spread. You wonder who saw it go, or if anyone did. Some eruptions happen in places untouched by humans, in EFCs when no eyes were there to watch, no ears to hear. And yet, the land remembers. You move on, higher, into the mountains now, where glaciers stretch like sleeping beasts across stone. Here, the ice speaks in its own language, measured not in words, but in bubbles, tiny pockets of ancient air, trapped in snow, then sealed in ice. You kneel beside a core, drilled deep from the heart of a glacier, and peer into its frozen spiral. It is a column of time, stretching back tens of thousands of years. Each layer tells of seasons past, holds breath from another age, and then you see it. A thin band, darker, dense, marking a sudden shift. Ash embedded within the ice. It came from an eruption half a world away, but the wind carried it, the sky surrendered it, and the snow caught it. It settled like a sigh into the waiting cold. And now, millennia later, you see that sigh frozen in place. A moment of violence, preserved in stillness. This is how we learn. We read the archives the earth has hidden, not in libraries, but in landscapes, not in books, but in cliffs and caves, in the rings of trees, in the hollows of lakes, in the silence of the ice. Every eruption leaves its fingerprint, and even when the surface forgets, the deep remembers. You wander through an ancient forest now. The trees are old, gnarled, their bark worn by weather and time. You touch one, feeling its rough skin beneath your palm, and imagine the years it has counted in silence. Inside, in its rings, are lines of light and shadow, years of abundance, years of drought, years touched by ash. Scientists call it dendrochronology, the study of tree rings to measure time. When supervolcanoes erupt, the ash can cool the skies and shorten growing seasons. Trees respond, not with words, but with narrower rings. One quiet year after another becomes a coded message, a biological testimony. The trees remember what the sky did. And so you learn to listen. You walk now through a desert where no water flows. The land is parched, the air still, but the stones beneath your feet tell another story. You find pumicelite, porous, born of fire. A rock that once floated across oceans, carried far from its volcanic birth. You pick up a piece and feel its hollowness. It is a stone full of sky. A stone that once held fire and now holds air. Some pieces still carry the fingerprints of eruption teeny shards of obsidian. Sharp and black, woven through the lighter rock, like thoughts threading a dream. You wonder how far they've traveled, how long they've waited to be seen. And then, further on, you find a fossil forest. Trees turned to stone. Their trunks still upright, roots embedded in what was once soil, but is now rock. They are ghosts of a world burned and buried. They tell of a pyroclastic surge, a searing wave of heat and ash that came too fast to escape. The trees stood where they were, and the fire swept over them. And now, hundreds of thousands of years later, they stand still silent monuments to a moment of transformation. You sit beside one and listen to the wind. It feels sacred. This kind of silence, not empty, but full of what once was. That the land does not mourn, it remembers. Not with grief, but with clarity. It does not forget the pain, but neither does it dwell there. It carries on. Scarred, but alive, and so do you. You cross a plain now, where scientists have mapped the reach of ancient ash. They've followed it in soil cores, in sediment samples, in caves and rivers and ocean floors. In New Zealand, they've traced the Taupo eruption through lake beds. In Indonesia, they've mapped Toba's legacy through the Indian Ocean. In North America, they follow Yellowstone's footprint across plains and forests and lakes. Everywhere the ash went, it left behind a record. And everywhere the ash fell, the world changed, sometimes slightly, sometimes dramatically. Species vanished, climates cooled, civilizations struggled. But always, eventually, life returned. You think of those civilizations, now the ones who lived in the shadow of these great mountains before they fell inward. Some left behind carvings, others myths. Stories of skies turning dark, of suns disappearing, of gods angry or sleeping. Perhaps they didn't know what a caldera was, or how magma rose, but they felt its effects. They saw the fire in the sky, and they passed down what they could in words, in songs, in stories told by firelight. Those stories matter, too, because memory is not just scientific, it is human, it is cultural. It is woven into our languages, our fears, our reverence for the land. You realize now that we've always lived with supervolcanoes, not in fear, but in awe. We build near them. We bathe in their hot springs. We farm their rich soils. We watch their geysers and name them with affection. We call them sleeping giants. And though they wake rarely, they remind us of something vast and ancient within the earth and within ourselves. You Keep walking. The sun dips low now, casting the landscape in long shadows. You come to a field where researchers have erected instrument seismometers, gas sensors, GPS markers. They are listening to, watching, learning how to read the subtle signals. A breath of sulfur, a tilt in the ground, a change in heat. Track it all not because they expect the fire soon, but because they know it will come again. Someday you sit beside one of the instruments, your hand on the ground. It feels warm still, deep below, not dangerous, just alive. You think about how far we've come, how we've learned to see what cannot be seen, to measure what lies beneath. We use satellites now, peering from space to watch the swelling of the land. We drill into calderas to study their history. We simulate eruptions on supercomputers, not to predict the day, but to understand the signs. And yet, for all our tools, the most powerful sensor remains the Earth itself. The stone, the ice, the ash, the trees, they remember, and so must we, you. Rise now and look back at the path you've walked. Through the plume, through the fall, through the chill, through the silence. It has all led you here not to an ending, but to understanding. The supervolcano is not just an event. It is a cycle. It is a rhythm. It is a reminder that the world moves in breaths longer than ours. That we are part of a planet that dreams in fire and speaks in stone. You take one last step toward the caldera's edge. The light fades. The stars begin to emerge, and the wind whispers again, soft against your skin. You listen not just with your ears, but with your memory. Asterisk, because what rises from the earth does not disappear. It becomes part of us. In the land we walk, in the food we grow, in the air we breathe, in the stories we pass on, and in the next chapter, you will follow that final thread. The quiet rhythm that continues beneath all things. You will listen to what still sleeps. You will walk beside the fire that has not yet spoken, and you will feel the earth waiting. Asterisk, somewhere deep beneath every step you take, a secret grows in silence. You walk away from the rim of ancient calderas, leaving behind the echoes of collapse, and feel beneath your feet a faint, rhythmic hum, the heartbeat of the planet's hidden chamber. It stirs in patient readiness, gathering molten currents and rising pressures, shaped by forces older than the mountains you see. You sense it not as a threat, but as a reminder. This world breathes. You pause among grasses that whisper across cooled lava flows, their roots probing warm substrata like listeners tuning to a distant drum. Each blade bends toward the unknown, warmth below, eager to drink the heat that has yet to reach the surface. You close your eyes and imagine the underground cavern filling with new melt, laden with fresh crystals dissolving into slick liquid. releasing gas bubbles that rise like tiny suns in a sea of darkness. The magma's secret language, once spoken in bubbles and veins, is now taking shape anew. It begins with a whisper of movement. Tiny fractures reopen in the chamber's roof, each one a dotted stitch in the fabric of solid rock. Over years and centuries, these stitches widen, connecting in patterns that scientists call ring fractures. But you feel them in your bones, a gentle stretching, like skin taut across a living drum. Beneath that drum, the molten heart pulses. You know this pulse is slow, deliberate. It does not surge without a cause. The magma gathers because it must, driven by density and buoyancy, by heat rising from the mantle, and by new melt injected along deep faults. It builds pressure not in haste, but in the measured tempo of geological time. The planet's rhythm has become your own. Around you, life continues in tandem. With the deep stirrings, insects scuttle under leaf litter, their tiny bodies guided by instincts crafted through epochs of change. Roots delve deeper in search of warmth and water, drawing sustenance from soils mixed with ancient volcanic glass. Birds wheel overhead, tracing invisible circuits that link air to stone, present to past. In each motion, you recognize the same story: emergence, pause, collapse, and regeneration. A cycle that shapes both planet and life. And you, standing on this living stage, feel both awe and responsibility. Fear, because you remember the tremors that once broke stone, and the ash that once dimmed skies for years. You recall forests silenced and winters prolonged. But wonder, too, because you've witnessed how ecosystems adapt, how pioneer plants colonize fresh lava fields, how lakes fill calderas, how nutrient-rich ash becomes fertile ground. You have seen life's tenacity in the wake of transformation. Tonight, you sit on a basalt outcrop, its surface still warm from centuries of residual heat. You draw a deep breath and listen, not to wind or wildlife, but to the world's slow exhale and inhale beneath you. You close your eyes and remember the words of those who study these rhythms. Supervolcanoes are not monsters waiting to strike, but organs in the planet's body, cycling heat and renewal. You sense the truth of that in the gentle hum at your chest. Your heartbeat syncs with the Earth's. You feel the magma's upward tug in every capillary, every bone. You recall the layered ash and ice cores, the tree rings and cave formations that record past breaths. You realize you're part of that record, too. A moment in the continuum. A witness to cycles beyond human lifespans. The grass around you sways, not from wind, but from tiny pulses of heat convecting through fissures you cannot see. The air carries a faint scent of minerals and sweet warmth. You inhale it and feel your body awaken, as if tasting the Earth's own breath. In that breath, you find comfort. The world is alive, awake, attentive. In the distance, steam, vents, whisper. You rise and walk toward them, each step a reminder that surface stillness belies inner motion. You crouch beside one and place your hand near the fissure. A gentle warmth grazes your palm, a hint of the energy below. You allow your fingers to rest there, feeling the connective warmth between you and the unseen chamber. In that communion, you understand you are not separate from this process. You are woven into it. You stand and gaze into the star-filled sky. The constellations have shifted little since your story began, yet you see them differently now, as points of light in a vast continuum, just as you are part of a continuum of cycles. You lift your face to the heavens, feeling the cool night air settle around you. And you hear the final whisper of stone meeting air. A single thought drifts through your mind. This is not an end. It is a pause between breaths, a moment of stillness that invites attention rather than alarm. The magma chamber will one day speak in heat and ash again, but for now it sleeps, poised between pulses. And you, in this quiet, share its peace. You lie down on the grass, arms open, palms to the soil. You feel the heartbeat beneath you, steady, a promise of continuity. You close your eyes, breathing with the earth's unhurried tempo. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And in that shared rhythm, you drift toward sleep, cradled by the knowledge that the world is awake beneath you. After all, you do not live on a dead world. You live on one that breathes. And in that breath, you find both fear and wonder, a story of endings and beginnings woven into every layer of rock, whispered in every wind, carried in every heartbeat. You sleep, listening to that heartbeat. Below, waiting for the next breath. Asterisk, thank you for joining me on this journey through Earth's deepest stories.